welcome to another episode of Midnight Manuscripts. I'm your host for tonight, Chisto Healy, and this story, wow, it's a doozy. It's about a woman who takes stardom to another level. But you'll see. Let's get to it. Chasing Dreams by Dev Solovey. The tome smells of ancient knowledge, filling the air with its Dead Sea Scroll aroma. Old books with yellowed pages always have a spiritual power, building in mystical energy with every new set of hands they touch. But after 2 centuries of collecting these bits and pieces of humanity, this one has an aura all its own. It radiates with gathered profane mana, as if every vengeful spirit to enter these catacombs through the centuries passed their hands over it. This is it, I thought, gazing with hungry eyes at the codex of Levoisin. This is how I will touch the stars. My accomplice Andromeda speaks from behind me. Her voice is barely above a whisper to avoid disturbing the dead remains that line the walls. "They're talking on the police radio," she says, tapping on one of her headphones. "They set off a silent alarm. We have to go. We have to make sure it's authentic first," my other accomplice, Morgana, replied. Yes. I adjust the black vinyl gloves on my hands. I reach into the coffin, removing the mummified hands that hold the codex in their eternal clutches. The client wants the real thing. Andromeda rolls her eyes, turning to watch the exit. "You're taking your sweet time with it." I pay her pettiness no mind, tracing the frayed edges of the binding. The client won't pay as much if it's damaged. The justification is hollow, of course. There is no client. There's only my years-long search, and my accomplices are merely a means to that end. They mean nothing to me. What matters is my ascension from this puny, meaningless planet. As a child, I thought space was an endless night, and to fly through it would be like sailing on a cloud of moon dust, passing my fingers through stars that glimmered like snowflakes in celestial light. I tracked the constellations, took pictures through my telescope, loaned piles upon piles of books about astral projections in the library. I told my teachers, my classmates, my family, and anyone who would listen, I'm going to touch the stars. They would ask if I planned to become an astronaut when I grew up, at which point I would say no. Didn't you hear me? I'm going to touch the stars with my hands. Salem! Andromeda calls my name in a fierce whisper. They're going to get here I pull my gun out of its holster and shoot her in the skull. The bones within the catacomb walls rattle. A few of them tumble off their shelves, breaking upon impact with the ground. Morgana screeches. What the fuck? I shoot her as well. She drops to the floor, blood leaking out of the hole in her skull, and threading between the cracks in the cobblestone mixing with Andromeda's. I holster my gun and turn back to the codex, then open it to the first page, licking my lips as I trace my fingers down the table of contents. It's written in Latin instead of French, a language I've studied for years in preparation for this moment. When I find what I'm looking for, I navigate to the proper section with a delicate hand so as not to damage the pages. It opens onto a full-page spread showing a detailed star map with the names of every star in the night sky. Their real names, not whatever Greek letters that buffoon Johann Bayer threw at them. No, each star had a name, because each star was a kingdom, and each kingdom was ruled by a monarch. Faint taps echo down the corridor. Footsteps. The police have arrived. Whether they'll find me depends how quickly they'll get lost in the maze of the catacombs. No matter. By the time I finish my work, my body will be an empty husk and my spirit will be millions of miles away. I pull out a piece of chalk and draw a circle on the ground, then line it with the symbols listed in the codex. I then sit in the center, placing the tome before me. All that remains is to choose the name of the kingdom where I wish to spend eternity. A simpler mind might choose Polaris, thinking of the prestige that the North Star holds over us Earth dwellers. They would be wrong. The real ruler of the sky, the true queen of queens in the vast expanse of space, is Vega. I write her name at the center of my ritual circle, my heart beating ever faster. I turn to Vega's page in the codex, reading through the list of sacrificial requirements. Eye of a nun. I grab Morgana's arm and drag her body toward me. Morgana used to be a Buddhist nun in Cambodia. It worked well as a cover for her dealings with the Chinese mafia. I turn her over, then take out a scalpel. I grin. Praise be to Vega. With eager hands, I pinch her right eyelid and pull it up, carving it off her face. I continue making precision cuts around the socket, careful not to damage the eyeball itself. At last, I sever the optic nerve, then pull it loose. I realize I forgot to bring a receptacle, so I improvise by using a piece of the skull that landed on the ground earlier. After placing the skull fragment at the center, I put the eyeball inside of it. I return to the codex. Heart of a noble. This would be harder, but not impossible. Nobility isn't a word people use to describe the upper class anymore, but they still exist. Andromeda had old money in her family, the kind that still allowed them to live in a lavish mansion. Her heart would do. The issue would be removing it. I examined the satchel on her right leg and removed the hunting knife she had strapped to it. The blade is sharp enough to rip her top open with relative ease, but I still used the scalpel to split her skin. Her blood collects at my fingertips as I slide it down the center of her chest, peeling it open and exposing her rib cage. With the sharp edge of the hunting knife, I cut through her diaphragm, making a hole wide enough to fit my hand through. I roll up my sleeve, then reach into her chest cavity, pushing aside her lungs. My fingers wrap around something that feels like a heart. I grip it and pull, the cardiac tissue stretching as I tug it out of place. Unlike other wet specimens I've held before, it's still pleasantly warm, pulsing with what little life had yet to fade from it. Praise be to Vega. I snip it free from the surrounding veins and arteries and place it in the receptacle, then turn back to the list. Blood of a thief. I chuckle. Easy. I pull off my now slimy vinyl gloves, then hold my left hand out over the receptacle and press the scalpel blade up to my thumb. It slices my skin open and blood drips onto the eye and the heart, settling at the base of the skull fragment. Praise be to Vega. When I'm satisfied with the amount, I tear a scrap of fabric off of Andromeda's shirt and wrap my finger with it. Using bone dust, more fabric threads, and a Zippo lighter, I set the contents of the receptacle on fire, scattering henbane pedicles around it as I recite the incantation. Oculus Domina, cor moniala, sanguinis, la truncula, haec sacrificia offero Vega, regina argentum lacus. The noxious smell of burning innards and henbane stings my nose, but I breathe it in anyway, intent on finally freeing my spirit from its fleshy prison. At last, I rise from my body, looking down at it for one final moment, and snickering as the police crowd around it. They can never take me alive. When I break the surface of the ground, I look up at the dense gray clouds, a delirious smile spreading across my face as I accelerate even faster. The sky grows darker as I reach the upper edge of the atmosphere, and soon I'm shrouded in darkness. The stars become streaks of light as I soar through space, my mounting velocity rocketing me toward my final destination. Bursts of color appear around me as I barrel into a nebula, whizzing like an arrow through clouds of cosmic dust. At last, I slow. I realize I'm growing near, and my heart jumps into my throat. I float down through glittering neon clouds of interstellar dust, coming into view of Vega's palace. It's ethereal and translucent, with swirling, intricate patterns carved into each edge. I land weightlessly before the gates, staring up at the spiraling lattice edged in gold and inlaid jewels. As I approach them, I stare and wonder at each detail. I run my hand over one of the columns to find that it has the texture and coolness of marble. When I take my hand away, wisps of stardust scatter around it. My heart jumps, sending a rush to my head. I've finally done it. Yes, I have achieved my dream of touching the stars, and yet I crave more. I have a whole palace to explore, to examine its every twist and turn, to see what secrets it holds. The gates open on their own, as if awaiting me. Beyond it are the doors to Vega's throne room, guarded on either side by two paladins. As I draw closer, I see them in more detail. They're giants, at least 4 meters tall, bearing even taller halberds with fiery glowing blades that look sharp enough to slice through the nucleus of an atom. Their armor is constructed from metals and alloys of various colors, not all of which I can identify. When I come close enough, they turn to face me, with perfectly symmetrical movements, crossing their spears in front of the doors with machete-like precision. A deep commanding voice booms through the hall. One of the paladins, although I can't tell which. Their speech seems to come from all around me, resounding from the palace walls themselves. "Who goes there?" they ask. I bow. "My name is Salem Malèvre." "Where do you hail from?" "Saint Malo, Brittany, on earth." "And what do you seek?" "To touch the stars." A grumbling noise echoes down the passageway, as if the palace itself was lost in contemplation. Swirls of ether collect around my feet, like currents of water rippling beneath the frozen surface of a lake. They examine me as if probing for truth. At last the paladins speak. "Nothing else?" I smile and bow again. Nothing else. The paladins look up, as if pausing to listen to something. I get the feeling like I'm standing in front of a computer as it runs several lines of code all beyond my understanding. At last they speak, and their halberds lift away from the door. "The Queen will have an audience with you." I thank the paladins, and the door opens onto a massive throne room that takes my breath away. A carpet spans the length of the floor, lined with threads of silver and copper and covered in gold dust. Along each side of the carpet are rows of carved pillars, glowing in oscillating fluorescent colors and halogen gases. Statues and carvings of mythic scenes cover each wall, portraying winged women fighting epic wars in galaxies so distant and foreign I could never know their names. And at the head of the room, I see her at last. Queen Vega sits on her throne, which is decorated in ornate engravings of angels garnished with jewels and metals that glisten under the wisps of light coiling around her. Her throne has 4 armrests to serve her extra pair of arms, and her skin is a translucent aquamarine, draped in a luxurious sheer chiton and a cloak threaded with gold and crystal white feathers. I reach the base of the platform, and remembering my practice for addressing royalty, I kneel before her. "Your Highness," I say, bowing my head. She examines me for a moment, tapping her long fingernails on one of her armrests. The floor beneath my feet is glowing again, giving me the same tugging feeling I had when I addressed the paladins. I get the sense that she's reading me, her magic digging under my skin to turn the pages. At last she breaks the silence. "Much time has passed since an earth dweller stood before me." Her voice sounds as though it shouldn't be coming from the clouds. "You apes are creatures of want, if memory serves. What do you desire in coming here?" She already knows what I want. Of that much I'm certain. She's only asking because she wants to see if I'll lie to her, which I have no intent to do. "I desire to touch the stars," I reply, "with my hands." She raises an eyebrow. "With your hands?" "Yes, Your Highness." Queen Vega stands up, revealing her towering height. Her feathered cloak flutters, then with a shimmer of magic morphs into wings that carry her down the steps. She lands in front of me, clouds of glittering stardust swirling around her with each gust of air from her wings. "Kiss my hand." Her fingers are in front of my face. I blink, the sudden request catching me off guard. But when I regain my composure, I obey, taking her hand in mine and kissing her knuckles. She seems to enjoy this, the smiling when I pull away. "Now you have not only touched a star," she says, "but you have kissed one as well." My heart flutters. "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Let me see your face." I look up at her, finally able to see Queen Vega in all her splendor. Her eyes, of which there are 4, glow like uranium glass. Rings and bangles coat her arms and ankles, and her bejeweled girdle bears emerald, topaz, spinel, sapphire, and other gems so rare and foreign I can't identify them. Her crown, carved from solid opal, is engraved with patterns of feathers and beset with diamond embellishments. My thieves' sensibilities are already assessing its value, even though I know taking it would be a terrible idea. Vega peers down at me. "You have lovely eyes." "They can never compare to yours, My Highness," I reply, not missing a beat. "So charming, too. She giggles softly, then pulls her hand away. I do not get many visitors, and the ones who come here rarely treat me with the reverence I deserve. Flattery, I figure, must be the way to get what I want from her, an eternal spot in her court. I'm humbled, your elegance, I continue. To kneel at your feet is to kneel before a force of nature. She gives me a wry smile, then beckons for me to stand. Join me! I get up and follow her, looking around at the glowing marble and long flowing drapes as I walk by her side. I've become quite lonely over the eons I've spent in this palace, Queen Vega begins as she leads me down a corridor to the left. My only entertainment is my paladins, whom you met at the gates. What are they, if I may ask? Little more than automatons, she replies. There were spirits like you once, but their consciousness died long ago. I frown. I was picturing a court full of other witches and warlocks like myself, people who appreciated the spiritual and metaphysical forces of the universe. But this place was oddly vacant. Is there really no one else? No one who's alive, she says. You're the only living thing to grace my halls in ages. I suddenly feel her hand on my back, talons gently running down my spine, and the hair on the back of my neck stands on end. I shiver. Have I frightened you? Queen Vega asks. Not at all, Your Majesty, I reply, unsure whether I'm lying. Her touch is oddly sensual, but with a kind of predatory hunger lurking beneath. I get a faint sense that I'm prey to her, and yet the fear only makes it more tantalizing. Something about your touch is magical. Here, your astral body is just as tangible as your body back home, she says. But every sensation is amplified. Every color is more vibrant. Every sound more musical. Every smell more aromatic. She runs her fingers up my back again, eliciting the same response. Every touch and taste more exquisite. Something about the way she says this, combined with her gentle touch, sends a wave of heat through me. I bite my lip and swallow the urge to touch her in return, unsure whether the advance would be welcome. We approach a massive ornate set of double doors, which open with a wave of Queen Vega's hand. They reveal a courtyard decorated with alien trees and flowers and planters along the marble floors. At the center of the room lies the thing I wanted to see most, and nothing I could ever have imagined compares to its splendor. The incantation in the Codex of Lavoisin names Queen Vega as the Queen of the Silver Lake, and here it is, spanning nearly the entire courtyard, glimmering under the glowing translucent columns. I almost forget to breathe. Would you like to stay here? Queen Vega says. In my kingdom. My eyebrows fly up. I thought I would have to convince her to let me stay, but she offered without me even asking. I remember what she said about loneliness, and it occurs to me that I'm just as much a solution to her problem as she is to mine. My problem being, of course, that returning to my body on Earth would mean returning to a life of imprisonment. My heart flutters again, and I smile. I would be honored to accept that offer. Vega smiles back, with the radiance only a goddess could possess. I'm glad to hear it. She turns toward the lake, and I stand motionless as though bolted to the floor. The offer was so surprising that I'm unsure what to do next. She makes me feel special, and that's a feeling I can get used to. There's something hypnotic about it. I watch as Vega approaches the edge of the silver lake, her billowing garments making it look as if she's floating. She dips her toes in the water, creating ripples as she draws her foot back. I watch two of her arms reach up to the clasps on her cape, and the other two reach around to the clasp on her girdle. She throws her girdle aside. Her cape drops to the ground noiselessly. Her chiton follows. She strips nude as gracefully as a dove, removing her crown last. Against my better judgment, I find myself staring. I remember her fingers drawing up my back, and the blood rushes to my head. When she lets her shimmering blonde hair down, a gasp nearly escapes my lips. When she turns to look at me, she smiles again, and I can't tell if it's meant to be seductive or if my mind just wants to interpret it that way. She beckons for me to follow her. "Swim with me." I bite my lip again. I don't know what she's planning once I join her in the lake of silver, but her allure alone is irresistible. "As you wish, my majesty." As I disrobe, I catch her watching me. Once again, there's a hunger in her gaze. I feel like a mouse to a hawk, and yet the danger makes it all the more thrilling. When I approach the edge of the lake, now fully nude, she wades back a few steps to watch me descend into the water. I dip my toes in to find it's not actually wet. When I pull them out, my foot is completely dry. As I descend further into the lake, the fluid clings to my skin, but doesn't soak through, as if enveloping me in a seamless blanket. Queen Vega breaks the silence. "Come to me." I wade out slowly, the silver rising above my hips. I feel heavier than water, constricting me in a way I did not expect. "You're special, Salem," Queen Vega says. "A cut above the others. You even killed your companions just to be in my presence." I begin to wonder how she knows that. But as I tread closer to her, she holds out another of her hands for me to kiss. "Each finger this time." I take her hand in mine and press my lips to it, starting at her little finger. Her skin is soft and aromatic like opium flowers, drugging me into a haze. She hums in satisfaction, then speaks again. "Know that each knuckle you kiss will protect you so long as you serve me." I reach her last finger. "And should you ever disobey me, they could crush you until you are nothing but a smear of molecules." "I wouldn't want it any other way," I breathe, again unsure if I'm lying. I'm already so lightheaded and out of breath, I can barely tell what words are coming out of my mouth. "You find this arousing," she purrs with a wry smile. I lick my lips but don't speak, unable to conjure any words. "Don't be shy," she says, putting a hand on my cheek. "I can sense your desire to touch the stars." Her other arms caress me, drawing me in. "With your hands." She pulls me into a kiss before I can say anything else. Her taste is ambrosia sweet, inebriating, a reserve fine enough to make Dionysus pale with envy. It sends me into an altered state that melts everything around me. It is all the fear and euphoria of ayahuasca, with none of the nausea. To kiss a star was to fall out of reality. My hands move onto their own as we make out, tracing the curves and contours of her body. As I run them up her waist, Queen Vega arches her back, moaning and pulling my hair. Her grip is rough, possessive, 4 hands to hold me hostage. As I trail kisses down her neck, I get the feeling like I've become a possession. At best, I'm a trinket she'll cling to. At worst, I'm a prisoner. I remember my dire situation back at home, and I realized there are worse places to be a prisoner than a palace made of stardust. As our legs tangle together, gasping and sighing as we grind into each other, I struggle under her grip, not to break free, but for the sake of it. I enjoy the futility. The climax rushes through me in a wave of bliss. I go limp as it subsides, but Vega isn't finished. She senses my exhaustion but doesn't stop, still using me to please herself. Even if I'm out of energy, there's something satisfying about being so desired. By a queen, no less. I can feel her hunger again. Perhaps I enjoy being prey. For some reason, I can't catch my breath. I feel lightheaded and weak, to the point of near unconsciousness, and the heavy liquid of the lake compressing me on all sides isn't helping. A memory slowly rises to the surface of my hazy thoughts. A few months prior, I had been contracted to acquire a set of arcane scrolls from a museum in Japan. When I cased it the week before the extraction, I saw an exhibit about Minamata disease, a particular kind of mercury poisoning, accompanied with a very graphic image of its symptoms. A small detail in one of the text boxes to the right of an exhibit about elemental mercury and the various levels of exposure and toxicity. How it was nearly 14 times denser than water. I panic, jerking myself away from Queen Vega. Her 4 hands grope at me, trying to subdue me again. But after more struggling, I wrestle myself free. I try to move faster, but the mercury is so dense, I can barely swim. How dare you leave me? Queen Vega's voice echoes through the chamber, so deafening as to make my bones quake. The power in it commands such fear in me that I become subservient, entirely on instinct. Frozen, I watch the emotions flood her. Her translucent blue skin turns a deep violet, and her eyes glow red with fury. I'm sorry. I can't be here, I stammer, cowering as she approaches me. I wade backward slowly. I can't be in this lake. I swallow. The mercury will kill me. She grips my throat. You would abandon me? Even when I said I'd protect you. When I offered you a place in my court. When I offered you love. Talons emerge from the tips of her fingers, drawing blood from my neck. You are no different from the others. The way she says this sends a chill through my core. What others? Mercury spirals around me, slithering up my bare flesh and binding me like a boa constrictor. I flail helplessly, trying to fight the quicksilver engulfing my face. I squeeze my eyes and mouth shut, but my arms are too constricted to reach up and plug my nose, and the mercury crawls into my nostrils. As the tendrils of quicksilver thread through my sinuses, I'm dragged down into the darkness, undercurrents reaching up and tugging at my ankles. It swallows me like a kraken. It spits me out onto a pile of something. The room I'm in is pitch black, so I can't tell what it is at first. It's firm, but still with enough give to cushion my fall. Slightly softer than silicone. I reach down and touch something rubbery and cold, and I trace my hands along it, finding it to be cylindrical in shape. Its texture is bumpy and flaky, and it has a strange smell that I can't place. As I near the end, it flattens out, widens, and then splits. I only understand what I'm touching when I finally reach its fingernail. I yelp and leap back, only to find myself stumbling over more heaps of limbs and falling onto my back. My voice echoes and I realize the room is larger than I can fathom. I get the sense that I'm in some sort of dungeon, but with the depth and vastness of a cave. What abyss had I fallen into? My breathing is shallow, and getting to my feet is nearly impossible. I feel dizzy and confused and my joints ache. My skin itches, and as I scratch myself uncontrollably, I can feel it flaking off beneath my fingernails. I told you to surrender. Queen Vega's voice booms through the cavernous dungeon, rumbling echoes vibrating through me. A bolt of plasma streaks across the room, lighting it up in technicolor cacophony of xenon, neon, and argon gases. The light illuminates the mountains of hollowed-out bodies stretching the length of the cavern, organs missing, all pink and coated in black pustules and peeling skin. Mercury poisoning. I look down at my hands and I can see the dark globules forming on my flaking skin as well. Fear twists my lungs. In a few minutes, I'll be joining them. I hear heavy, monstrous footsteps tramping behind me, and rubbing my eyes, I look over my shoulder. A hulking, two-headed griffin, Queen Vega, stalks ever closer to me. Her 6 legs maneuver over the mounds of corpses, crushing their bones beneath her feet with dreadful crunching noises. Her massive figure towers over me, eyes glinting with hunger, under the neon lights. I try to scramble to my feet, but the mercury poisoning is taking its toll, and I can't balance long enough to run away. You disobeyed. Her giant paw steps on me, pinning me in place and digging her talons into my flesh. I scream, but the sound is quickly cut off when one of her beaks tears out my throat. Her other beak stabs at my face, pulling out my eyes. As she eats me alive, the pain is agonizing, made worse by the heightened sense of the astral body. It's only when the razor-sharp point of her beak punctures my heart that I finally die. Well, that's it for this one. I don't know what you think, but I think Salem got exactly what she deserved. Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Midnight Manuscripts. Keep it creepy out there, people.